Evening, everyone, and welcome to Not Q&A. This is the show smashing the leftist echo chamber with unconventional and unapproved opinions. We constantly have the lying leftist media in our ears all the time. They're in the seats left and right beside me, but we will be dampening their discourse tonight. And first of all, 1st of April, we've got news from Russia. Putin opens up about Russia's 100-year-old secret. Alexandra Marshall writing reports that Russia hates to be upstaged by the United States. When the CIA recently released thousands of declassified UFO documents to the Black Vault, the media cogs inside Putin's lifetime dictatorship churned into action. Selling last century's dusty secrets has become somewhat of a game to the world's superpowers. Slipping the odd jaw-dropper to the press allows their leaders to dominate the global conversation without declaring an expensive war. There are plenty of whispers on offer, and Russia's vaults go deeper than anyone else's. Like a dying whale announcing its demise, the United States has been hurling previously coveted military secrets onto the web. Most go unreported, or if they are picked up, they have trouble surviving 2 hours in a 24-hour news cycle. This proves the suspicion that humans are a generally disinterested, difficult to impress species with a short attention span. Even the CIA's UFO files have barely survived beyond the first few Guardian articles. But Putin remains undeterred, this morning announcing that there is a pending announcement regarding the Siberian Deep River files. Over 100 years ago, Russia was happy to let the world work themselves up into a conspiracy theory about 1908's Tunguska meteorite impact because it concealed another incident in nearby Vanavara. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that with my Russian accent accurately, but it's my best shot. 5 months before the world got itself distracted by the Tunguska explosion, 3 fishermen were dragging sleds along the mostly frozen Tunguska River in an unnamed part of the wilderness when one of the men broke the blade clean off, smashing the wooden sled to pieces. Remember, this is 1908. It had caught on a metallic protrusion in the ice. The fishermen thought this was an old sword from a forgotten war, but when they attempted to dig it out, they discovered that the metal point was part of a much larger structure submerged in the river. The incident was reported to the Tsar, but Nicholas II had bigger problems. A small group of interested parties within the government sent secret teams out to investigate the site. Publicly, this is where the story ends. The fishermen were never able to be reached for comment after it disappeared in a blizzard, after they disappeared. While the Tsar's teams all died, or went missing in action during the Great War. By the time Vanavara was properly settled in 1932, there was no sign of their discovery. The Siberian Deep River files were shuffled to the bottom of the really weird pile as 2 wars reshaped Russia. Now, this would have been the end of the story if not for Xi Jinping selling a highly valued item back to Putin at the end of 2020 under the cover of COVID. The unlisted item was said to be a piece of military wreckage that had found its way into Chinese airspace and crashed into a field of solar panels, destroying a third of the solar plant. But there's no satellite evidence found to back up this claim. Instead, aides close to Putin have informed the press that this was an item stolen from a Russian storehouse during the war, listed only as Siberian Deep Lake. While no one can confirm that the object, which weighs at least as much as an armoured tank, is actually an extraterrestrial spacecraft, there are reports within the Communist Party of China of preserved organic material being extracted from the item, ground down along with the desiccated wings of a Wuhan horseshoe bat, and sold on the black market as Space Monkey Extra Long Good Time, available in powdered form. Putin was due to speak later today at 8:15 a.m. Moscow time. Well, joining me tonight is Jack McGuire, who is Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland. Welcome to the show, Jack. How are you?
Thanks very much for having me. I'm wonderful.
Excellent, excellent. I'm not sure if you had any of that Space Monkey Extra Long Good Time powder, but my suggestion is that if you come across it, don't. And now, also joining us, sorry, what was that?
I'm trying to get off it.
Also joining us tonight is Jim Penman of Jim's Mowing fame. Jim, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, good evening.
You're a intellectual with a PhD in history, not just a lawnmower. Have you?
Intellectual, I'm afraid. A bad name these days.
Honour where honour's due, Jim. But have you come across that Russian history in any of your research?
No.
Excellent. Well, congratulations, by the way. We've got this announcement from you on Twitter today. Not sure if we can pull that up onto the screen, Matt. This is big news. You've got Jim's Mowing, Jim's Pools, Jim's Antennas. What else does Jim's Home Services do?
Well, lots of other things. Fencing, security doors, dog wash, test and tag, car cleaning, building inspections, hazardous waste removal. I can't even go over them all myself. It's about 50.
Let me see if I can bring that up for us.
Jim, we should chat to you about setting up Jim's unions.
That's right.
So here we have introducing Jim's Air. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
What does the announcement say? Time to shake up the regional airline scene to help support regional Australia. You're always supporting Australians, Jim. Proudly introducing Jim's Air, which will start flights commencing to 16 destinations in mid next year, with plans of expansion shortly thereafter. So have you had many people believing that announcement today?
Well, I had a call from a friend at News Corp actually asking for my comments, and I said, Anthony, have you noticed the date? And he said, "Oh, I'll come back to my desk with my tail between my legs."
Well, of course, it's a brilliant April Fool's joke because it's incredibly close to reality, and the best April Fool's jokes are believable because they're fantastic and yet credible by being so close to the truth. We started listing the brands before. Do you have an accurate count of how many different brands Jim's Home Services have spread into?
Do I have an account of it? Yeah, I could tell you what they are if you'd like. You want to read them out or something? But
no, was it 10, 20? There's just stacks.
No, but there's 40 something.
Wow. Yeah, that's phenomenal. So why not Jim's Unions?
I don't think we're very good at it. I think I'll leave that to the experts.
You were telling me something about that today, that you've learned that just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at everything. How did you arrive at that pearl of wisdom, which sounds like common sense, but I think there'd be a lot of people who would be surprised that there's a whole bunch of industries you're not interested in.
Well, the way I've learned is by losing a whole lot of money doing things I shouldn't have been doing. Just in the past 3 years alone, I tried to build a factory to build fiberglass trailers, which I lost a lot of money. I tried to launch a psychology institute for teaching psychology. That was a disaster too. They're both still going, actually. They're both quite successful, but not with me in charge, that's for sure. And trade exchange, which also lost money, but isn't going any further. So there's 3 things I've done just in the past few years. Look, it seems like we do everything, but there's a commonality. There are things that people call up to have done a service, whether it's mowing lawns or bookkeeping or IT or pest control. It doesn't matter what it is, but they've got that in common. Anything that's very different to that, we're not really expert in.
Yeah,
I think delusions of grandeur to think you can do everything.
Yep, brilliant. Well, a big welcome to everybody watching tonight. Please make sure you share the show, invite your friends to watch Not Q&A with us. Use the hashtag Not Q&A, QANDA, if you can, and make sure you also join the conversation. We'd love to hear your questions, hear your thoughts. Hopefully there'll be some disagreement on some issues between us, and certainly between you watching at home. And please remember, if there is some disagreement, let's start with civil and sincere intellectual arguments, intelligence, instead of just abusing people who might have a different position to you. and that way we can have a better debate with better policy coming out of it.
Very rare these days, Dave, isn't it?
Well, we do, I guess, have to try it at some stage. But yeah, and look, it is, and this is something that I've noticed. Now, certainly, you had Saul Alinsky write his book "Rules for Radicals," which is the handbook of Antifa and all kinds of leftist plagues on society. They're just designed to discredit and undermine instead of meaningfully engage in conversation. And with the advent of social media, that's become easy for everybody to do. And I've seen it creeping in to the point that it's not rare from people on the right of politics either. And it's just something we need to be much better. And I criticised a popular conservative politician at the last federal election, and I had a bunch of my supporters accusing me of reading too much ABC and not having independent first-hand knowledge myself. I'm like, wow, that was quick. Maybe there's something more meaningful behind where I'm coming from, and maybe you should inquire about that instead of just being really upset that I challenged your preconceptions for a start. So I guess my hope is that I do challenge people's preconceptions more often, and we can have some meaningful conversations about them. What about you, Jack? What observations have you had, I guess, working with unions as you do and professionals in there? How hard is it? Is it becoming harder to have a difference of opinion and get to the bottom of things?
Oh my goodness, with the work that we do. So just a little bit of background, I guess, about what we do. So we set up an alternative nurses union about 8 years ago, which has about 7,000 members now. At its core, its constitution prevents any money going towards a political party and just provides, I guess, the core union services without the politics on the side. So we're not affiliated with the Labor Party, not affiliated with the LNP or anyone else. We then set up an alternative teachers union when a group of teachers came and approached us and said, we really like what you're doing with the nurses. Can we do the same thing? And now I'm helping with that. So, look, Dave, I'd like to say that, I've tried to have conversations, but we haven't even got to that stage. I mean, if I could give you an anecdotal evidence, I went to a university day, and it was a graduation day graduation day for nurses. This was a few years ago, back when I was with the Nurses Professional Association of Queensland, and they, were, where do you go and get a job, all that sort of stuff. But they also had the Queensland Nurses Union, and they had us as the Nurses Professional Association of Queensland. Now, I like to think I'm a reasonably personable, friendly guy, and I went up to shake the hands of the Queensland Nurses Union lady at the other side just to say g'day and open up a dialogue, and she literally hissed at me. She went like this.
Oh, so, wow.
So I don't even get to the stage where we can, have a, civil discussion, let alone being shouted down or, undermined or discredited, because we don't even get to that stage. Won't even talk to me, which is, I think, bad.
I had somebody at the football a couple of weeks ago pretty much do exactly the same thing, a complete stranger, and she objected to me wearing a Christian T-shirt with a cross on it, as if it was the swastika, and she was cringing at the moral confrontation that she was enduring. Like, I just, where do you go with somebody like that? You just, and it's so.
Because I'm sure they would be committed to freedom of religion if, say, you're wearing a Buddhist T-shirt or an Islamic T-shirt or anything. But it's just, it seems to be, anyway.
Yeah, it's very sad. I believe in traditional values and freedom of expression and respect for people's views. To me, is part of our traditional values, and we're losing them, and it's very sad.
One of the things that's incredibly rare, Jim, let me preface this. From my experience, there's a lot of cooling down that happens. The closer you can get to somebody, the more intimate you can make the conversation. So if it's an email or a social media exchange, it could get pretty heated. And in customer service, I would always try and talk to a customer, at least get them on the phone, and they would be a lot calmer than they would be in writing. But then if you can get face-to-face with somebody, then typically that's going to be your best chance of having a human-to-human conversation where people can not just deal with their anger, but actually deal with a relationship. One of the things that's incredibly oppressive about the Jim's group is that your mobile phone number and email address are available for anybody in the world who's got
not my phone number, thank you. Only my franchisees. My email address is very open. I had a call to
your email address. Still,
he was given my email phone number by somebody else, and I just said, "You didn't do you any favors," and I hung up the phone.
Oh, really? Okay.
People outside of gyms. Otherwise, it'd be impossible.
It's still impressive. I mean, there's not many global company CEOs, global group CEOs who give away their personal email address for anybody that needs help solving a problem they can't solve locally.
Well, Dave, calling me a global CEO is probably a bit over the top. Thanks very much.
How many nations are you in?
Well, we're actually technically in 4, but that doesn't. It's not quite the normal view of an international corporation.
Well,
they tried to get me into the BRW 250th rich list or something, and I said, "Don't be joking. We'd make 250,000." No, yeah, that's not true actually, but still. No, actually, what I do. I'm very. If a customer rings in with a complaint that hasn't been dealt with the first time, it's handed to me as an email, and I'll respond and I'll look after it. So I take a very detailed thing, and every franchisee can contact me about anything, anytime, email or phone. So I'm quite contactable. It's very useful. Actually. I get a lot of good stuff coming from out there. People just email me. I don't mind.
Yeah, actually, I think you replied to me very quickly. It wasn't your mobile number. I was obviously wrong, but you included that in your first email, which was still impressive.
Well, because I knew you were then, so that's okay. The media or blogosphere and stuff is fine to talk to, but just not the public things.
Yeah, I get that. Now, there's actually other breaking news today, which we can share, and that is that Queensland Police have added 3 new helicopters to keep us safe from COVIDiots over the long Easter weekend. Anastasia Palaszczuk held a joint press conference this morning with Chief Health Officer Jeanette Young and Police Commissioner Katarina Carroll to announce new COVID-19 numbers and health directives to be enforced by police over the Easter long weekend. The Premier stated, "I'm sorry to say we have had another Queenslander test positive to the extremely infectious UK variant of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. And as a result, the Chief Health Officer's advice is that the lockdown should not only be extended, but it is a matter of life and death that the government's restrictions are vigorously enforced by police. As a result of following the best scientific advice available, I'm today announcing the immediate funding to expand the Queensland Police helicopter fleet from 2 to 5, including the necessary pilots and ground crew. 1 additional helicopter will be based in Brisbane, where most cases of community transmission have been traced, and the others will be based in the tourism destinations of the Gold Coast and Cairns. This makes me very sad," she said, "that when most Queenslanders are doing the right thing and are not leaving their homes, not even hanging out the washing without a mask on, that some selfish people still insist on endangering the whole state and imposing the hardship of extended snap lockdowns on everyone. Do not leave your home, people, unless it's for essential purposes or an emergency," Premier Nana said. The 5 Polair helicopters will be using their sophisticated onboard technology to detect when people leave their homes, even if it's just to hang out their washing in the backyard. They will then hover above them and drop a face mask to the suspect. If that person refuses to wear a mask, police will then issue a fine or, in some cases, arrest serial offenders. I want to thank the police for putting themselves in harm's way, risking infection from the highly infectious UK strain, and fining people for leaving their homes or not wearing a mask and endangering the lives of 5 million other Queenslanders. End quote. When asked by a reporter if the police helicopters would also be used for law enforcement activities like catching criminals, the Premier responded her top priority was keeping Queenslanders safe, and nothing was more important than arresting the COVID-19 virus. Now, I think 90% of people on my social media pages today observed that it was April Fool's Day, but there were quite a few that were aware how close that was to reality.
All too believable, I'm afraid, with the garbage that's gone over the last year, that's for sure.
Jim, there's old news reports, and I just get you to bring me up to speed. But I think it was October last year. You were seriously talking about suing the Victorian government for the loss of income caused to your
franchise. We're doing it. We've got a case going before VCAT right now, on a test case, and they're taking it seriously. There's QCs and stuff involved. We're covering all the costs, and if we get a positive response, either now or on appeal, then we'll use that as a precedent to get everybody to claim, not just my own franchisees who run fairly deprived of income, but also any independent contractors. Because the original guidelines from the government actually said a sole operator working alone is fine. That's good science. That's sensible. How can a gardener working alone in somebody's house be at risk of infection? They don't have to see the customer.
Yeah.
So it was sensible. The council workers were out doing it, and the Premier in his infinite wisdom decided that somehow we were all plague carriers and we had to be shut down. So tens of thousands of Victorians lost their job for no reason. And I was really furious. I'm supportive, have always been supportive of reasonable restrictions, things like masks and stuff, fine. But what they did was garbage, and it was horrific. And it was all done for political advantage.
Yeah, and that's the surprising, disturbing, mournful thing. I mean, this is just, I'm just devastated that my nation is so full of people who race towards safetyism, this absolute sacrifice of liberty for the illusion of safety with an exaggerated threat.
A nation of wimps.
And faith in government, so much faith in government. I mean, gosh, listening to Jeanette Young on the TV today with her press conference, it just makes my blood boil. We called her out earlier last year when this pandemic first broke for lying to Queensland about the levels of PPE stocks. There was a circular that went to very senior nurses and health officials saying that PPE stocks were very low and that people needed to be innovative in their approach should PPE run out. And they're very worried about it. We put out an email to the chief health officer. We made a big deal about it on social media and said, "What is this about? Why can't you guarantee the supply of PPE?" We even found a supplier of PPE in China who could ship it in. Granted, it was expensive, but at least we would have our front line protected. And came out 2 days later in the media and said that they had absolutely no problems with supply of PPE. An absolute bald-faced lie. You've also, I mean, I got a couple of people that work in the office here who went to one of the hotspots that was released, I think, yesterday morning. They still hadn't been contacted by contact tracers. No email, no text messages. I mean, they can't even get the basics right. You had the case, the clusters here in Queensland are because a nurse and a doctor contracted COVID because they were dealing with the frontline. Everyone's talking about, well, why weren't they vaccinated? Well, if they had the PPE, the adequate PPE in place, they should never be exposed to the virus. But we haven't even got those procedures right. I mean, at every stage, the government just gets it so wrong, yet people are just so willing to trust them and put their livelihoods and their lives in their hands. And
look, I'm in favour of reasonable precautions, but we've become a nation of pathetic wimps. There's a wonderful story from the siege of Tobruk about people's attitude towards authority when a British officer with really immaculate shine shoes came up this Aussie digger digging a trench in the bottom of a trench, stripped to the waist, and he got really angry and he said, "Why don't you show some respect for an officer and salute me?" So the guy gets out of the trench, goes to pick up his shirt, and he's a major. And this guy was the captain. And so he saluted him, and he said, "Listen, I'm the CEO here, and my men don't even salute me, so piss off."
Yeah.
That's the attitude we used to have. That was a wonderful part of our character. My goodness, where is it now?
Yeah, totally right. Harkening back to what you were talking before about how you got treated by the, did you say it was the nurses union rep, Jack?
Oh, yes, at the university, yeah.
Right. Janelle Wills commented previously that unions aren't what they used to be, and her dad was a union rep and was nothing like that, and what the unions are today, she thinks they've lost their way. And Brett Clark, a great supporter of the Good Source, says that he was a member of the Queensland Nurses Union and the union wouldn't talk to him either. So there we go. Now,
Brett should join the end.
Different in business though. The company I've competed most against, VIP. You know, Bill Viss and I have a good relationship. I ring him up every now and then, say hello, how's things going and stuff. We always got on well. You don't have to, just because you're a competitor doesn't mean to say you have to be an enemy. And he's a good guy. I owe him a lot. I mean, he was the one that showed me what to do, in a sense, got me started. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Who was that again?
Bill Viss, VIP.
From VIP Home Services.
Yeah, when we started, they had 250 when we tried our first one. So we've done somewhat better. But Bill's always a good guy. We've met, we've talked. There's no anger there.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I've been in other industries and sectors before, and I've always thought collaboration was healthier amongst your competitors than aggression.
Well, during lockdown, we actually supported the independents as well, and I got on quite well with the head of the Independent Mowing Association. So we always work with them. Okay, we're competitors, but we're in the same industry. Let's work together for mutual good and show respect for each other.
It's interesting. I've been in a number of enterprise bargaining negotiations, and there'll be the employer sitting at the table, us sitting at the table, whether it be the NPAQ or the TPAQ. But this particular example was the Queensland Nurses Union also sitting at the table. And if the Queensland Nurses Union had a good idea, we would get right behind them, and we would also argue for that, and we'd say, yeah, that's a really good idea, we should do that. Every time we would open their mouths, the Queensland Nurses Union would hound us down regardless of what we said. So it's interesting how they're not really in it for the workers, they're just in it for themselves.
Now, something that you mentioned before, which ties into the nursing profession, Jack, is how willing people are to trust government, how much faith they have in government, and to administrate really, really complicated and complex things despite demonstrated incompetence in so many levels. Professor David Flint, one of the regular commentators and contributors to The Good Source, his show comes out Saturdays, Take Back Your Country. He says something along the lines of, if there is not a problem which is not entirely created by government interference, then everything that government does interfere in makes those existing problems worse than they were before the government got involved. Apologies, Professor Flint, if I didn't get that quite as economically as you do. But on the nurses union subject, Queensland government is racing to implement assisted dying legislation, euthanasia. Now, this has to be one of the silliest things for a society to trust a oversized, incompetent bureaucracy to administrate the concept of death as therapy. What is your nurses raising as concerns with the Professional Nurses Association?
So our President Mark Gilbert has been on record talking in the Courier Mail about this. It's obviously a sensitive issue, but nurses weren't consulted. And in a situation where this legislation will directly impact on nurses, we are concerned that if there is voluntary assisted dying legislation brought before the Parliament and passed, nurses will inevitably get caught up in this. Whether there are mistakes made, whether all sorts, they'll be brought into the moral maze of having children who would, rather get their hands on an estate quicker. All sorts of issues which are going to be presented, and nothing is ever black and white. And there's always all shades of grey. And I guess it's when the shades of grey get closer to black, it's going to be, the nurses and their registration, their livelihoods that are put on the line. So, is this really the path we want to go down? Certainly not without consulting nurses, certainly not without having really, really robust protections in place. And at the moment, we don't see that. Yeah,
brilliant. Jim, I understand you're a traditional values kind of citizen. Now, this is one of the topics where a lot of conservatives are probably willing to take a more progressive position. So I assume nothing, and therefore sincerely ask, what's your position on euthanasia?
Look, as a Christian, obviously I find it very difficult, but my mother had a horrible, horrible, horrible death. Absolute misery for just on and on and on, and her mind going and dementia and stuff, this vibrant, intelligent woman. And one time she asked me if I would take her to Switzerland to die. She just so much wanted to die. No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't help my mother to die, but yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I sympathize with anybody, honestly, who does that or tries to do that, because I've seen it and it's just ghastly.
Of course.
No medication could help her, because it was mental anguish. It was just seeing my mother and loving her and seeing what she went through. Nobody should have to put up with that.
And not just in your personal circumstances, Jim, but I think a lot of cases this may be abused or could be abused as a cheap way out.
I can see the dangers.
Instead of just funding palliative care properly, because at the moment we have, and which is my cynical view, that the current state government can't afford to keep these people, so they just, they'd rather have them off the books. Maybe we should be looking at funding palliative care properly, and then have a conversation once it's been funded properly about where to go.
I think that's eminently sensible, Jack. And here's the reality: even if we'd exhausted all other options, and death as therapy was our last straw, the fact is that there is no jurisdiction in the world which has experimented and sustained liberalisation of euthanasia laws which has not had unintended casualties. As you're saying, the risks of people who this was, all the best intentions of legislators to provide the safest, safety guards against the slippery slope that's inevitable with legislation like this, creeping and creeping and creeping from its original scope. There is no jurisdiction in the world which has gone down this path and not had unintended casualties. That should be something which every legislator in every parliament in Australia and the world actually gives them each incredible cause for pause. And instead, we're galloping towards it. But the fact is, we haven't exhausted all the options before we consider that final terrible option. As you say, there is inadequate funding for palliative care. Is the goal to kill people, end people's lives, or is the goal to end people's suffering?
Well, the problem is
we have to fund better and train better in palliative care.
The trouble is, it still happens, but it happens under the cover. We know it goes on. We know that doctors do this. We know that people do this. We know that people kill their loved ones. It happens. It's a bit like drugs, like heroin and all the rest of it, the horrible things that go on. I mean, they're ghastly. They're dreadful. They're a blight on society. But when you make them illegal, you cause all sorts of problems without necessarily stopping any of it. It's the same principle. Something may be evil, something may be bad, but it's happening anyway.
It's not quite equivalent. And again, we know that it's not quite equivalent because in other jurisdictions where that's been the argument and it's been, look, this thing, sometimes they just look the other way and they give them an overdose, deliberately trying to end their lives. And sometimes the family's involved. What we know from other jurisdictions and stories is that those people that will push the envelope and go a little bit too far in the grey when it's illegal and criminal are much more brazen, much more emboldened to go so much further, so much more often. There's not an increase in the ethical administration and safe termination of life, if there is a greater oxymoron, I don't know. But there's actually far more abuse of that because now there's this social sanction, this social blessing on ending people's lives, and the abuses of inappropriate, involuntary terminations becomes far more common. So it's an easy argument to go to. It happens anyway. But the reality is that the abuse of therapy...
It's not an argument either way. It's not. It's not easy either way. There's strong arguments on both sides. But most Australians do support it, and especially those who've seen what I've seen. It's an awful thing. So what do you do about it? You try and make the best decision you can. But I wouldn't condemn people for wanting to commit suicide, end their lives, they're in terrible suffering, or for families who want to help them when that's what their beloved loved ones actually want. I just don't think it's as easy as that. I know sometimes it goes against. It's like, okay, you can talk about other things too. I mean, as a Christian, I think abortion is abhorrent, but do you actually make it illegal? When you know what's going to happen, you're going to get backyard abortions. It's not as simple as saying you can just make everything right. The law is a very blunt instrument.
Yes, indeed, and I think the ultimate thing is, and I don't want to labour on this point the whole night, but if there's a distinct and permanent change to the tone and nature of care and society and culture when we cross this Rubicon. It's a terrible statement on how we value life when we go there. And the fact is that less than 3% of people die with suffering, and most of that is preventable and solvable. And that should certainly be our primary goal before we consider these very terrible extremes. Bo James Heyman says, the state of palliative care is abhorrent. The line should be drawn where medicine delays or prevents the timely death of an individual against their will. Jack, I want to move on to education now. And I've got this article from the Courier Mail, which says Queensland Education Department and Teachers Union accused of toxic culture of bullying and favouritism. School principals have levelled sensational accusations against the Education Department and Queensland Teachers Union, including allegations of bullying and favouritism, with one claiming she was forced to remain silent. The story says allegations of a toxic culture of bullying and favouritism have been levelled at the Queensland Education Department by several current and former school principals, with the powerful Teachers Union accused of being a Labor puppet, quote unquote. Former principal Tracy Tully spent 38 years in classrooms, including as a principal in various Queensland schools across the state, before being dramatically stood down in 2016 while acting principal at Oakey State High School. She told the Sunday Mail she was targeted and bullied by Education Department management and accused them of using the Public Service Act to silence principals within the system from speaking out. Staff have been relentlessly demoralised. Any actual power has been taken away from principals, and the daily demand of constant change in policy and garbage. You couldn't keep up with it, she said. The culture changed and the fear started, and from then on they just flogged you with a stick. The cane left the kids and was put onto principals. If you got one tiny little thing wrong, you were punished. Ms. Tully also claimed over the past 20 years the department had become increasingly politicised and accused some Queensland Teachers Union members of heckling her and other staff for not openly advocating for the Labor Party. She claims QTU members were pressured to distribute Labor Party material in the lead up to state elections, and that principals who refused to go on strike were harassed. The union has incredible power, too much power, and they've been allowed to use their influence, she said. I was victimised because I refused to buy into the puppet show and allow voting at the school. They came for my throat. I refused to be involved in anything political, and it did not go down well. Ms. Tully also claimed senior school principals who openly donated to the Labor Party were promoted within the department. Jack, what is going on? Are teachers universally wanting a highly politicised union?
Oh, absolutely not. And that's exactly why the TPAQ was started, and that's why people are joining us in their droves. I need to be careful what I say here, because I've sat down with Tracy Tully and heard her full story. And if you want to know her full story, she's released a book called Fearless, one word, Fearless. And boy, oh boy, does it tip a bucket on the department and how it works. And without putting words in her mouth, essentially how it works, it's not a case that the department is politicised or that it's very close with the union. We found out through the case of Marg Gilbert, the nurse. They are the same people. You have people who are the highest paid officers in the Queensland Nurses Union, then going and becoming chief human resource officers in the department, swapping notes, and it's just they're the same people. It's not like they're in bed together. They're the same people. So they had a situation where, in Tracy Tully's case, she says if the government goes to the school or the principal and says, we would like your school to be a voting centre. I guess that works well for the Labor Party because they'd like, the schools to be a voting centre. So when everyone's going in to vote, education's on the mind of the voters. And I guess historically that's always been a good thing for the Labor Party. And as part of that condition, the principal needs to be there handing out how to vote cards. Now, Tracy stood up and said, no, I don't want to be handing out how to vote cards. I'm here to teach kids. I'm not here to engage with politics. And no, quite frankly, I don't want you to turn my school into a voting centre. What she says she fell victim to was commonplace for many principals. If they say no, false allegations are levelled. They are stood down on gardening leave. So stood down on full pay while they investigate. And during that period, an acting principal is put in place who will do what they're told. And then, 3 months down the track after the election, they have you can come back now. Sorry, there's nothing to the allegations.
Wow. Jim, we're seeing around, certainly in Queensland, I'm actually not sure about the rest of the state, but we're seeing laws against donations from developers. And these are laws which limit the size of donations to, well, if not ban them altogether. And it's designed to prevent that industry from having undue influence on political outcomes. And certainly that would mostly hinder the fundraising that the conservative side of politics generally or historically has managed to achieve, probably being more pro-development and free market.
Well, actually, the money on either side is toxic to democracy. It basically means that the best democracy money can buy. It gives power to the elites. Now, whether they're the union leaders or whether they're the business tycoons or whatever, it just shouldn't happen. There should be individual donations only, as far as I'm concerned. No organisation should be able to donate to a political party, only individuals, and it should be public funding. I mean, it's not as bad as in America where the whole country is run. Look at their dreadful health system where they spend twice as much as we do for far worse health, and 20% of the population is uninsured. That's all to do with lobbying and the amount of money that these people give to the government. Now, we've got a better system here, but big money is a terrible problem. It really undermines democracy. It undermines the ordinary person's vote and influence to an extreme degree, and you get dreadful, dreadful problems.
I don't know that I sympathise with the sentiment of what you're saying, but I guess I probably lean more towards the less regulation is better. Anybody should be able to donate. But what I certainly feel, and I know how money can corrupt it, you're not wrong about that. I'm not sure that regulation is the solution. Transparency and immediate reporting might be, and let people connect the dots, obviously, for themselves. But what I certainly think is that we're dealing with a stacked deck here. It's not a level playing field. It's rules to limit one side's donation potential.
Can I jump in there and correct you, Dave? There is a carve out for unions, registered organisations. So property developers aren't necessarily banned from engaging with politics because they can actually donate as a property developer to unions who can then use it in for politics.
Wow.
So, yes.
To unions. Oh, that's terrific. That really is.
Obviously, that was a tip of the hat to the CFMEU so that they can take property developer donations because all the people that would pay them would be property developers. So anyway, they're off to the races.
Gee, well, thank you for that correction. That is galling. I don't know how these people can lie straight in bed. That is so crooked. I'm sorry, whoever crafted that idea. Look, all I advocate for is a level playing field. Let's have the same rules for both sides of any.
I'm agreeing to that, except I'd say the better rules is that neither side gives money, because that makes that arms the powerful against the weak. It's what happened in Victoria.
And I wouldn't hate that if it was just the same rules.
It's totally it's chained by the Labor Party and by the Labor movement by everything. They're just don't even interested in ordinary people. They can throw tens of thousands of small business owners out of work for no reason. Why? Because they've got no power. They don't give any money, so why should I listen to them? Hey, they're citizens. Who gives a stuff?
Chris Hewitt agrees with you, Jim. Chris Hewitt agrees with you. He says, disgusting, ban all donations.
Yeah, good on you, Chris.
I'd like to see electoral reforms quite significant. I'd like to see funding put into some kind of generic information campaign presenting all the policies of every party and candidate where money was taken out of the equation, so better funded parties didn't have better information about their policy.
Funding of elections based on the results in the last election, that's one way of doing it. And individual donations, that'd be quite enough.
Well, I think
towards the powerful and against the powerless. It really is in so many different ways. I mean, I've got hobby horse, but look at the way we handle greenhouse gases. Okay, this is a problem. I don't care. I'm a conservative. I still think greenhouse gases are an issue. What do? You subsidise solar panels and put the electricity price for everybody up. Well, who benefits from that? Obviously, people who are wealthy enough, like me, to put up solar panels. Who suffers? Those who are living in rented houses. Now, what the Canadians have done, which is so much better, is they have a uniform carbon tax across the country. Everybody pays the carbon tax, but it's distributed equally back to the population, which is a progressive tax, not a regressive one. And that's just one example amongst so many. The whole system is stacked against ordinary people in favour of elites.
Yeah, it is crazy that the price of electricity for everybody, including those in extreme poverty and low income, ultimately subsidise, electricity saving devices for people who can afford them. It's an injustice.
It's not even efficient too. Any economist will tell you if you want to reduce emissions, having a carbon tax is vastly better than these subsidies, which are incredibly bureaucratic and expensive. It's a much better system. But the trouble with the system of what the Canadians done is it helps ordinary people. It doesn't help the elites. So we're not going to do it here. Why should we?
Yep.
This is a government. This is a country run by the elites for the elites.
Let's maybe come back to the topic of climate change and whether we need a carbon tax or any kind of subsidy of renewable energy later. Maybe we'll get you back on another show with Jamie Spry, Jim, if that's possible in a month or two. He might argue passionately and with a bit more research than I have at hand. But I do want to talk. Sorry about.
I'm happy to take that one on. That's for sure.
That'll be fun. And hopefully our viewers are gracious and not insulting you for supporting a carbon tax.
We got a number of Sparkies, Dave, that want to set up a Electrical Professions Association of Queensland who want to see nuclear power in Australia.
Yeah.
So
now there's a solution.
Maybe you should get some of our Sparkies on, and they can chat about nuclear power and how great it'd be for Australia as well.
Set us up, Jack. That's two future interviews we need to get you to set up for us, along with what's her name, Tracy Tully as well.
Yes.
That'd be great to do a sit down with her. But look, I want to talk more about the alternative unions that you've got here, because if the government's unwilling to do this is something that you guys clearly have, and I can't help but think that surely there is a large market of nursing professionals and teaching professionals and other professionals who would love to have all the benefits of a union without any of the politics of it. And my understanding is when you take political donations out of the business model of your union, that actually lowers the membership fees significantly as well.
Oh, hugely. So we run both our nurses union and teachers union at the same price because that's what it costs to service the members. It's $442 a year for a full-timer. If you're a teacher, it's based on what you earn. So that scales. If you're an executive principal, that goes right up to $1,500 a year, which is very expensive. And it goes down to around about $800 for the average teacher and $800 for the average nurse. So by virtue of the fact that we've been around for a number of years now and we're able to stay afloat, charging $442 a year, it does sort of make you want to ask the question, well, why have the other unions been charging $800 a year and where has that money been going? We obviously did have a reveal all in the Courier Mail recently with David Farashadi. He used to be on the Queensland Teachers Union State Council, and he's now come across and he is the treasurer of our organisation, the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland, and has sworn black and blue that there will be not a penny go to the ALP or any political party while he's in charge of the purse strings. But he said while he was at the Queensland Teachers Union, he would see, his quotes, war room style call centres set up with staff, so bloated QTU staff, and then they would do expensive demographic analysis into work out which ones are the marginal seats, and then call into those marginal seats, from saying that they're from the teachers union, they're a teacher, and you need to vote for the ex-Labor Party candidate because it's going to be good for your school, for your kids, which is quite a compelling argument. But does it end up benefiting the teachers? Maybe. Does it end up benefiting the head of the unions that then go on to cushy Senate seats? Definitely.
I can say something about teachers' unions. I kind of like the idea of unions standing up for ordinary people, but one problem I have is when they make teachers unsackable, no matter how incompetent they are, which is a major, major problem, because kids are the most important in society. How can we possibly have a situation where it doesn't matter how bad you are, you can still be a teacher? Whereas if we tried to run gyms like that, we'd go bust in no time. You just put a person on by qualifications unsackable, you couldn't work it. It's only because it's a monopoly that it works at all. And it's a terrible, terrible problem. People ought to be able to be sacked if they're no good at what they do.
I think you're diagnosing the wrong problem, Jim. I get where you're coming from, but the issue is that teachers aren't allowed to just teach. They're micromanaged at every turn, and it's all centralised, and comes from the department. And they spend half their days trying to do one school reports and doing all these reports and pushing all this data into the central office, which may or may not get analysed. It never gets used, so they never get to just teach. And these are professionals. I mean, these are people who are tertiary educated, like doctors and lawyers. They're teachers. They've tertiary education, and they don't teach.
You're right. There's far too much bureaucracy. That's so much overregulation. Absolutely, absolutely correct. They should have a few clear metrics, like success in jobs, for example, success at university, but they go to university, success in trades, to a certain extent, some clear testing which they do. That's okay. But they are micromanaged, and that's ridiculous. And it's a dreadful waste of resources and teachers' time. But we still should have competent teachers.
Sure. And if there is a poor teacher, everyone deserves their day in court, and everyone deserves a fair trial and all the rest of it.
Court if they're not a good teacher, and that's the problem. It's so complicated. I know teachers. I've spoken to principals, and they say I could never sack a teacher. Doesn't matter what happens, you just transfer them. You cannot sack them unless they do sexual abuse with a kid or something like that. Unsackable. That's wrong.
Jack,
Everybody lose their job if they're not good at doing what they do. I would like to see teachers paid a whole lot more, but hold a lot more accountable and given more help and less bureaucracy. I reckon if teachers are being paid 120 grand a year, but made accountable for doing a good job, and have the controls taken off them, we have a lot better education system in this country.
But that's the other problem. I mean, if you say what's a bad teacher, well, a lot of teachers are being forced to teach out of scope. I mean, your background's in history. I'm sure you could get up and teach a history class, but what if I told you as a principal tomorrow, Jim, now you've got to go and teach a physics class or a maths C class or dare say a clarinet class? How would you go?
I like physics. I think physics is exciting.
That's your fault.
Well, that's the matter of teaching, running schools properly, I guess, too. But, look, I got my kids send my kids to private schools. We don't have that kind of problem. But that, again, is when you're wealthy enough to get away from the state system, you're all right. But it should be the same for everybody. Every kid, no matter how much money their parents have or don't have, should be entitled to a good education. And everything that stops that, whether it's over control of teachers, whether it's foolish requirements, whether it's being incompetent, you can't be sacked, they should go. And they should be paid more. And we should put more expenses into education, but in a way that helps kids to learn better. Because there's nothing more important. A single teacher can change lives, can change thousands of lives. There's no greater calling.
Just on that private school and the public school, I mean, we the people that we have in our office here that we employ, I don't think we have anyone from private school. They're all from state schools, and they're all fabulously smart and intelligent and brilliant. And have outperformed those who went to a private school. So I think you can get a good education at a state school.
Oh, you definitely can. You have absolutely brilliant teachers in state schools. I'm not saying anything. What you've also got is some awful teachers in state schools, and many kids suffer from that.
Jack,
Absolutely.
do you get any feedback from any of your members which indicates any kind of sympathy with what Jim's saying, that they wish there was a little more accountability and, you know, on-target professional development, actual support? Like, do they ever complain that there is the occasional, if rare, peer who just is in the wrong profession altogether?
Oh, yes, I've had that feedback for sure. Yes, I know. Our position as the TPAQ is that we are totally on board with what Jim was saying before. You know, incentivise salaries. You know, those that are doing well, the elite teachers, the best of the best, we should be drawing them in, which I think we already have some of the best of the best, but they need to be locked in. You know, some of the best of the best. You know, in maths and the STEM field. Why would you stay in teaching when you can be poached and sent into all sorts of other industries and pay a hell of a lot more? So, no, I agree with that. I think that those that do a good job, particularly even those that go out rural, you know, they should be rewarded for that as well. And I don't think they are at the moment. I think in the department and even just this government, we've had, you know, successive governments of a particular colour in Queensland, and they are hell-bent on equality, not necessarily equality of opportunity, but equality of outcome. And that always leads to the lowest common denominator. And I guess, you know, sometimes that rears its head as a problem in the teaching profession.
Yep.
They shouldn't have to be promoted to principal to actually earn a better living. The best teachers should be able to earn money no matter what they are. Why shouldn't you give a superb teacher $250,000 a year salary if they're really, really good at what they do? Why? Yeah. Would it be great if we could attract people from going into parasitic professions like law, for example, into something useful like teaching. Like in Finland, for example, where the best students want to become teachers because it's so prestigious. That's what we should do. We should reward the people who do the things that really matter in society. There's too many lawyers. You know, there's more law students in Australia than there are lawyers. And most of the lawyers are completely superfluous anyway. They do things like launch.
How do your lawyers like that characterization?
Yeah,
my son's a lawyer, good one too. I'm not trying to blacken the profession, but all the same. I mean, goodness, there's terrible things go on. I mean, just give you an example, okay? I know that you're right off the topic, but I had a case where a franchisee had a claim against the franchisor. I initially supported it. I said, look, I support you if you want to take this on. Instead, he went to a lawyer. It went letters back and forth, and it went to mediation. It was settled at mediation. This guy got $40,000 back, okay, which is a fair thing. His legal fees were $100,000. Now, what psychopathic lawyer would do a thing like that for a $40,000 claim? He got what he asked for, but the lawyer just bled him dry. Who won out of that? Who lost? Happens all the time. I see it all the time. There are a bunch of leeches. I mean, there's good lawyers. I'm not trying to blacken the profession, but there's real horrible animals in that profession. I can tell you. I know.
Oh, you're right. I know a lot of good lawyers.
Why pay them so much? They had to buy on $70,000 a year and pay the teachers $250,000. We'd have a lot better society, wouldn't we?
Jack, where is your Teaching Professionals Association saving money other than not making any? So you don't make different political donations like to the Liberal Party or National Party. You're just making zero. Is that right?
Absolutely. So we don't engage in in-kind support. We don't donate to the Queensland Council of Unions or the ACTU or any of those other sort of bodies where money seems to get funneled around. You know, we don't run these big, expensive third-party campaigns where I know that the electoral legislation was changed the death before the last state election so that unions could roll out and have, you know, a number of call flutes and stuff. We don't engage too much with that. The political jousting, I guess, that we engage with from time to time is all through the Courier Mail and the ABC and news outlets. You know, if a politician's made a bad decision, we'll go on record and you know, give them a punch if they need a punch. But you know, we don't get involved with any of that. Also, I think it's been a very long time before anyone's applied, I guess, the digital age to unions. So a lot of our processes that are automated, streamlined, online. So we're able to cut costs and save members for money at every corner. And you've got these really old, slow behemoth unions, which really haven't caught up. They've started to try to. I must say, when we first came onto the scene, they looked like they had websites. It is only going back about 5 years. Looked like they had websites built in the 90s, HTML-coded websites. Just looked very old and clunky. And ever since we came along, funnily enough, a little bit of competition, everyone pulls their socks up. We did a far better job. They're trying to compete with us now. The person that actually wins.
Good. I have to comment on what Janelle just put before about apprenticeships too. That's a great example of where government money should be putting it. Yeah, that's great. Right on, Janelle. Look, the government spends millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions training lawyers, okay? Why don't they put just a little fraction of that money into training people to do something useful to society, like being plumbers and electricians? You know, we could train. We have got thousands and tens of thousands of unserviced leads in fencing. You know what it costs to train a fencer? $5,000. Nah, can't afford it. Too expensive. Yeah, I'll spend $1 million to train a whole lot of lawyers we don't need, but to put up fences, come on, nobody needs fences. Nobody needs sparkies. Nobody needs plumbers. No. Let's put the money where we want to in arts degrees. I mean, we can never have too many art historians and lawyers, but you know, we can do without sparkies and electricians, people to build fences and handymen and stuff. It's ridiculous. Our crowd is so out of whack.
You know what I'd like, Jim? And I went to university chasing this and could never find it. And this was QUT, which is supposed to be one of the universities for the real world, not a sandstone university. Something that helps with what if I want to start up my own business? What if I want to have a go and be a little bit entrepreneurial? I have no idea.
I spent 10 years getting a PhD and ended up mowing lawns for a living. Come on.
Putting any money into that, there's certainly no, I would say, any education around that at schools. Schools are totally built around trying to get people into universities.
Yeah,
no one then comes out and goes, hey, I've got a great idea. I might have a crack at doing this, because they go, geez, well, I don't even know what the first hoop to jump through is.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that system that you mentioned, Jack, I think less than 1 in 4 people actually end up going straight from school to university or using their school qualifications as the path for admission into university. There's now many other ways of doing it. But
they're asking university qualifications for more and more stuff. For example, to be running in a childcare centre, you need some paper qualification. Now, I don't know, if I had a child in a childcare centre and I had 2 options, one who was some kid just out of university who's never changed a baby's nappy in her life, or you had a mother who's raised 3 great children, I'd know who I would look after my children. Qualifications are garbage. What should happen is we actually have the best people regardless of qualifications, and paper qualifications are very little use for most jobs.
I totally agree. And I think that's probably one of the ways that you achieve my end of getting more people into business and having a crack, is to try and get rid of some of that, I guess, regulation, barriers to entry. And oh gosh, it just seems like a regulatory nightmare to try and get involved with this at all. Plus there may be a bit at the start saying, it's okay to start up your own business, which I never even heard while I was at school, or even the first couple of years at university. It was only the people that I met at university, not the lecturers.
It's a terrible prejudice these days against working with your hands. You've got to have sit in front of a computer and do something highfalutin and white collar and stuff, instead of going out, getting your hands dirty and doing something useful. It's a real bad trend. It's part of the degenerative society. We don't respect manual labour, and we should.
Yeah. You think you're absolutely right. And it would be fantastic if there was as much dignity in leaving school at year 10 and doing an apprenticeship as there was in passing grade 12 barely and doing some hobby kind of degree at university at taxpayers' expense. It would be.
My church, actually, he left school as soon as he possibly could. When they got an apprenticeship, became apprentice of the year. In his 20s, he was offered the opportunity to run a factory. He's now the senior pastor of this large organisation with a school and everything else. He's an incredible guy.
Brilliant.
Education just wasn't his way to go. He wasn't good at schooling, but he's a great guy. He's smart, he's enterprising, he's everything. He could have been absolutely wealthy if he hadn't gone into ministry. We need more alternative ways of doing things.
And obviously he's not stupid or bad at learning. It's just that the one-size-fits-all approach to public education, which is something teachers have to work with because of the nature of the beast. But it obviously doesn't suit everybody.
Well, I disagree. Teachers often don't even get the chance to try and work with that, because every time there's a new school come in, they bring in a new pedagogy, and then it's, the whole new system of learning changes.
Yeah.
And retirement, there was a comment on there before. My mother was actually sacked from the teaching department. She was a relief teacher. She was doing a good job. She liked doing it. The principals liked her, and then she did something really bad, so bad that she got sacked. She turned 65, and that was a shocking thing to do. It was bad for the school, bad for the kids, and really bad for her.
She should have been in the TAQ, Jim. She should have been in the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're supporting people not being sacked for turning 65, I'm telling you, listen, I turned 69 in a couple of months. I'm not going to retire for at least 20 years.
Yeah.
Good on you. Yeah, I hope to be wrestling with my grandkids at 120 or great whatever's.
And when I do retire, I'll be dead too, so it's not going to be retirement as such in the normal sense. Sitting down on the patio, yeah.
Yeah, no, you can't stop moving and living and contributing. Jack, you are saving so much money. Are you increasing and actually giving unions a run for money in any of the other things that you are doing, like negotiating assistance, or when they get into trouble, legal support or professional indemnity? Are you covering all of those things at least an equal, if not greater level in any other innovative ways?
Yeah, well, I mean, not an innovative way is we are providing PI insurance, which the other unions aren't. I guess that's innovative, but it's not really rocket science.
I thought every union did that.
No, the Queensland Teachers Union refused to do it. Granted, the government does indemnify most times, 9 times out of 10, but they do need to make an assessment, whereas we have an underlying professional indemnity insurance, so it's just safer to be with us. I think the Queensland Independent Education Union, which operates in the private school space, says they have it, but they won't show their certificate of currency or how much the coverage is. I mean, we're doing little cases on the side, such as, we had a win the other day, which meant that long service leave accrues while you're on work cover, little things like that. But I guess one of the big things, particularly with the teachers, is member against member issues. Our Vice President, Cameron Murray, had an issue with a boss, and he went to the union. He was currently paying, I think at that point, paying $1,300 a year, and the union said, "Oh, sorry, your boss is in the union. That's a member v member issue. We actually can't help you out with that one." And he went, "Geez, I've been paying all this money for 30 years and it's all for naught." So he came across, and obviously now we've set up the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland, where we will take on member against member issues, and either set up Chinese walls, or we've got a policy where we would take the junior staff member on and outsource the more senior principal, I guess.
So when you say outsourced, you mean to like out-of-house counsel?
To one of those evil lawyers, yeah.
They're not all bad. I don't mean to say that. There's some scumbags and there's some wonderful human beings. Yeah. My own in-house lawyer is a lovely, lovely lady, Harpreet, one of my best friends. I love her dearly. So I'm not trying to blacken. I just think there's some pretty bad eggs out there too.
I'm just
no doubt.
But I don't know how the Queensland Teachers Union had operated previously. I would have thought that most issues would be member against member issues if you got a principal against a teacher. So
yeah,
it's stunning, and I guess that's why we're having so much success at the moment. People are coming across because they like the service provision that we're offering. Having massive wins. I mean, gosh, we're redefining what a trade union is with the Mark Gilbert case. We're uncovering a hell of a lot of collusion, as I was saying before, between the department. We've got Queensland Health, which is being headed up in the HR department by former Queensland Nurses Union officials. They're trading notes on an internal government memorandum. They're all on oath saying that it's the first time they've ever seen an internal government memorandum being given to a third party to get their input. This is all over a memorandum that was put out about us by the Queensland government, saying that we're not a real union and we can't do X, Y, and Z, when legally we can do X, Y, and Z, and that's factually wrong. And we're now $200,000 later in the court, with lawyers and QCs. And we're getting that overturned, but by golly.
Oh, I love what you're doing. I reckon it's a great idea. Better service and lower costs. All for it.
Absolutely.
They really can. Employers can be awfully powerful. They can treat people like dirt. We really try very hard at gyms to treat people like valued associates and look after them and listen to what they want. So, and some employers aren't like that. We absolutely, what you're doing is great.
And this is the problem I have with unions is there
being sacked.
Sorry,
that's all I say. Sorry, go on.
That's okay. Just I think the nature of the technology is like a two-way radio. Only one person can talk at once, and otherwise it just cuts out. But I'm sorry. I think I talked over the top of you. Just say the last 5 seconds of what you finished with, please.
No, I just said I think unions have got a strong role to play. I just don't like to see incompetent teachers preserved from being sacked because it hurts kids, and they're the most vulnerable and needy in the society.
Yeah, I think my personal take on unions is I don't like them, and that's because they predominantly and nearly exclusively seem to be toxic, entities that throw their weight around with some kind of arrogant swagger. But I do support the presence in society of helping people who might be scared and powerless and alone to stand up to unfair and unjust workplace practices. I think that's great.
But you look at what happened before unions were around. Look at the history of the way that employers used to carry on. It was absolutely disgusting. They do the most awful things. They give people unsafe working conditions and no breaks and just treat them like absolute dirt, sack them for no reason. Unions did a lot of good. And I think probably
historically, yes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like feminism. Once these achievements have been won, back at the turn of the century, first wave feminism had a lot of redeeming values about them. They should have, advocated for actual justice and actual equality for women. Fantastic objectives. I'm all for that. But then there was second wave feminism and third wave feminism and fourth wave feminism, and who knows what they're up to now. But they're irrelevant in their original purpose because that's done and dusted. Check, justice and equality achieved. But
if you didn't have unions, then you'd go back to being completely. I'm sorry. Look what happens in Amazon in America, where they fought to keep unions out. People are treated dreadfully. I mean, some of the conditions there and the ridiculous rates of pay and stuff. I think unions got a good role because when you've got someone like Jeff Bezos, who's a trillionaire for heaven's sake, against your poor ordinary guy, what chance has the ordinary guy got? You got to get together. I'm not saying
if unions did what I guess Jack is and his groups are doing now and stuck to their knitting and just focused on the customer's needs, just focused on justice and equality and fairness for their members, I would have no problems with unions. But it's this toxic presence in the body politic where they are just, they have created their own gap in the marketplace. And so what I say is hurrah that there's more competition and that the consumer wins.
I think Chris just came up and tweeted it before saying the power goes to their head, and by jingo, it's only just a start. You look at what Bill Shorten was doing with Chiquita mushrooms. I think they lose sight of the little guy, their members, and they end up getting involved for themselves. I mean, if you go around and you've got a business paying for everyone to join the union as a cash payment, to Bill Shorten, the AWU, not so great. We had a situation, just to show where this is heading next, the big fight, which a lot of people don't see coming, is the industry super space. A lot of people love superannuation and the industry super funds. I think they're fantastic. We're at a negotiation recently at Arthur Gorrie, GEO Group, I think it was at the time, privately run. And the only thing that the union wanted at that point was to change the default industry super fund from Australian super to their default industry super fund. Now that was the only thing they drew a line in the sand over. We're going to strike over that. Wages and conditions, who cares? That was the only thing. So if that doesn't give you an insight into where their power base is kind of going to come from in the future, these big industry super funds and pushing around other people's money for whatever their goal is, I don't know what does.
How do we get more competition in the union space, Jack?
Well, Come and see us. I mean, we can roll out a new union very quickly if people want to. It just needs a group of 3 or 4 people in an industry. We've got a system in place. As I said, most of it's automated and online now, so the barrier to entry is a lot lower. We've spent a lot of money throwing, good money after bad, trying to get that up and running, and now we've got a system that does that. I guess the next step for us is to move into state and into different professions.
So there's no legislative hurdles or barriers or things that need to be changed to make it easier to compete in the trade union space?
Oh, look, maybe minor tweaks, but ultimately where this stuff stems from is an International Labour Organization convention. I think it's C98 or C80, Convention 87, which basically says that everyone has a right, everyone has a right to form and join their own trade unions without distinction whatsoever. So basically, you couldn't have a government who was a treaty to this party to this treaty saying, everyone can have a union, but we're going to make the barrier really hard, and you need to have 5,000 members to start. So they did away with that, so they make it basically as broad as possible, so anyone can form and join a trade union because that's the protection that's needed. And that's what we rely off. That's then been interpreted in the Fair Work Act. It's been it's been adopted in the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission, because we're still a party to this. I mean, I think you've got the Australian Human Rights Commission Act is the only place that defines trade union, and it's basically a registered union federally, registered union at state level, or any similar body. And you've got language like any similar body because it wants to capture anyone and offer those protections to anyone that wants it. And that's where we're using that, and we can certainly play in the private sector as much as the big boys. And now we're creating new law with the Gilbert case, with representing those in the state system, so state employed nurses and state employed in Queensland, and then it's just a matter of moving into state and interpreting their laws as they have them. But I mean, it really is it would be a poor state government of whatever colour in whatever state who would turn around and say, we don't respect you as my employees' right to join or choose whatever union of your choice. You must join my union that I say you have to join, and your choice is you join my union that I say you have to join, or you're not in a union at all. And I think that's a bit.
Look, I think it comes down to the same case as the powerful against the powerless. Now, where the power is with the unions or the power is with the business, it's overriding. But I can talk about my own industry, franchising, and the dreadful things that go on when franchisors have too much power. Like what happened with Retail Food Group, where you had basically this international corporation which brought up all these brands and treated their franchisees like dirt and just sent them bust with the most dreadful things, like forcing them to buy spoons double the price they get from Coles, or to sell pizzas at a loss because it helped the franchisor. We just changed their whole setup and then have their franchise terminated. There is a gross imbalance in power. And one of the things I was determined when I set up gyms was to give my franchisees power in all kinds of ways. Like we require a vote of franchisees to be able to change our own manual. That's only can be done if franchisees agree. And I've said again and again that the government should be doing more to protect franchisees. And one of the best ways to do that would be to regularly poll franchisees every year and report publicly what they think about their franchisors, and then put that out to that would do far more than all these dreadful bureaucratic things that even the lawyers can't understand. I
love it, Jim.
Every time they've had it, I've spoken to politicians, I've gone to everything, and they just completely ignore me. They say, oh, let's have more lawyers, more bureaucracy, more complex disclosure documents, which even the lawyers struggle to understand. It's just so much garbage.
I think transparency is a wonderful solution to infection. Sunlight is the best cure for infection. It is that old adage.
There are some great systems around, and there's some absolutely appalling systems, and it's so hard to know what. The only good thing about the franchising code is that they must, by law, give you a list of all the current franchisees, and so you can contact them with contact details. And I've seen that abused. I've seen them give every franchisee with the office phone number, or don't give it till you give me a substantial and unrefundable deposit, and go whistling for help if you like at the end, because who's going to stand up to us? The terrible things going on in the industry too, and it's always the case the powerful against the powerless. And that's why I see unions having some role, not to become so powerful they push everybody around, but to give working people some sort of a say, some sort of a strength in unity, like we're trying to do in franchising. It's the same principle.
Well, Kel Bunyan has an interesting comment, and I'm not sure how it's going to go down, Kel. He's not an intellectual. He's not an international company group CEO. But Jim, Kel wants you to be Prime Minister.
I've heard that one before. I make a terrible politician. It's like going into business doing all those things that I've done stupidly, like trying to run factories. I'm not good at politics. I say what I think, and you can't do that in politics.
I think more people need to say what they think. Maybe just go a bit easy on the lawyers, eh?
Can you imagine running a political movement whose sole aim was to make sure that ordinary people were treated okay? No way. Every elite in the country would be against me. The lefty elite, the right elites, everybody. Come on. Ordinary people cannot run this country. All we can do is choose make a choice of elites, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, if you would like to get your lawn mowed, or if you would like to have your pool cleaned, your fencing made, your dog washed, your termite control done. Actually, Jim, I need some pest control done. I might call your local pest control guy. Building inspections, mowing. Jim's does all of that for you. And if you want to manage your own business, then head to jims.net. They've got leads going to waste, apparently. And then, of course, if you are a teacher, if you are a nurse, especially in Queensland, then you need to get onto tpaq.com.au, the Teaching Professionals Association of Queensland.
Even though we're Queensland-based, Dave, we do actually service people interstate. I mean, I think we've got about 50 members in New South Wales, and I think something like 70 in Victoria. So we're all over the country now.
Brilliant. So wherever you are in Australia, you heard Jack say before, if there's even just a small group, half a dozen, they're going to be able to start looking after you where you are, and they're very keen to do that. I'm very keen. I have, by the way, there's no advertising going on here, no kickbacks, no sponsorship. I'm just grateful for these guys to bring their information, experience, and opinion to you. And that's something you pay for. I'm employed by you, the fans and supporters of Good Source. So thank you very much to the Good Source supporters who are always generous and keep this happening. But what I want to see is more competition. I want to see the consumer win, the average person. I want to see better service and more affordable. And certainly, I think that the average union experience in Australia over recent decades has been net negative. I understand that there's a purpose and a benefit that they should be doing, but they've gone well beyond that. And there's been a net negative influence on Australian politics. And I'd just like to see a level playing ground and better competition in that space so that those professionals get better services. And if you want to be political and you want political donations, then go ahead and make that in addition to your professional fees. Why not? Everybody should be involved in politics, I think, but voluntarily and not forced and coerced with their union fees. That's not cool. Separate it if you want, do it together if you want, but you should have the choice, and competition gives consumers and union members the choice. So thanks for that, Jack. Look, something else I want to plug is that if you have any stories on these topics, send them in. If you've got a story that you'd like to tell, you might be able to pre-record it, or we might be able to even get you on the show. There's not a lot of opportunity for that, but who knows? Send your tips to editor@goodsource.news, and I'd love to, if you'd like me to put you in touch with these guys, tpaq.com.au for Jack, for the that's one of the websites anyway, and of course Jim's is at jims.net. but you can also send me your email there. I do want to also just say visit goodsource.news for videos and podcasts by other leading conservative commentators. And we are here to disrupt the mainstream media. Again, just bringing competition into the place and giving you the option of diversity of information and interviews. And hopefully that is going to help make the average Australian a better informed voter, and therefore we can end up with a better government for everyone. Gentlemen, is there anything you'd like to add to the conversation before we wrap it up for the evening? Jack, you first.
No, I just want to say thanks very much for having me. I think this is a fabulous idea, Dave. You've got a fantastic show, and I'd love to be on your show in the future, and strength to your arm. Good on you. And lovely to meet you too, Jim. We'll get you into Jim's unions and Jim's lawyers.
Well, actually, looking at Jim's legal, we are thinking about that one. Yeah. Well, for myself, it's a delight. I love talking about this stuff. It's sounding off. It's good to be able to ventilate some of these things. Yeah, but my email is tim@jims.net. Anybody wants to contact me, and if you want to be in business, we've got hundreds of thousands of leads we can't handle. So we'd love to talk to you if you want to really have a great lifestyle. So there, I'll push my own barrel on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And it does sound like you'd be somebody good to do business with, especially if you're happy for all of your franchisees to annually publish their opinion of you. It's that's a degree of confidence that you can't help be inspired by. That's jim@jims.net. Send him an email. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That's the web address there, jims.net. But yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much again. Thank you to the viewers for watching. Thank you to the supporters for supporting. And don't forget to watch our shows coming up over the weekend with Take Back Your Country with Professor David Flint and Behind the Curtain with Alexandra Marshall. And by the way, if you wanted to support Alexandra Marshall's flood appeal, she's one of our contributors, her farm, and everything that she works with, her complete library house was flooded. We're putting together as much money as we can just to help her rebuild her library on eBay and however she can. I think we're getting close to $500 at the moment, but head to goodsource.news. I'll just try and put that up. goodsource.news/ it's gone, don't worry. goodsource.news/Marshall, and you'll be able to make a donation there. And we'll certainly round that up to make sure it's a good contribution. And Alexandra, by the way, has seen your messages from the many donors who have put together already and is genuinely touched and appreciative of the Good Source viewers and supporters. So thank you very much. Well, that's it for Not Q&A tonight, April Fool's Day. Hope you enjoyed some of the fun at the beginning of the show and didn't go out and start an insurrection. I'm Dave Pellowe, and good night.